How are you guys? Maxine, Lameen,
Hi, I'm good.
Hi.
guys. Okay, I have a
Hi
bunch of
from
people.
Hi,
Berkeley.
good
Our
evening. How are
internal
you?
team, how are you? How are you? Our internal team, I put you guys as co-hosts, so you could let all of our late folks come in. So first of all, thank you guys for being here. I haven't seen some of you for the entire year. I saw Rohan last week. Hold on, Rohan. Hold on, we're going to talk about pivots. I'm like, role change. Okay, Maxine,
Absolutely.
I saw you role change. Um, also, how are you, Lameen? I haven't seen you for the year so far.
No, not in 2023. I've
No,
hardly
and
been
this.
here. I've been out most of the year. Just only 1 week I've been here.
Wow. And for you also, Avneet, how are you? It's so wonderful to see you. I got your lovely book. Thank you very, very much. We're going to talk about it today.
My
So,
pleasure, Sahar. Lovely seeing
okay,
you too.
absolutely. So let's get started. Today, we're going to talk about how to career navigate, pivot, and reinvent yourself. And this talk, I couldn't think of better people to have this talk because it's something on the minds not only of our community, but all of the platforms that Gleek powers that will now be able to see this talk. It's one of the biggest things, and I think often when we think about career navigation and pivoting, we think about just coming out of college, and that's not the case, right? So I'm going to jump right in. For anyone attending, there is some of you that do have CPD certification requirements. So just make sure and put a note to Kate that you're here and that you're looking to get your CPD certificate. So that way she knows. So first up, I'm going to do a quick intro of some of you. We have Lameen. And Lameen, I have to say to you, many people think, they immediately look at your title and they go Nobel Peace Prize, and they're like, well, like he already did everything. Right? A lot of times people are like, what do you do after that? Right? So I really want, I think, our audience is going to really enjoy hearing about this, particularly, I know from your, from the UK and Austria, but, your home country, in Africa, we actually power the Yoma platform, and you have a lot of fans on that platform, the UNICEF Yoma platform. And I think
Oh,
your feedback on this is going to be really awesome because they get to see that whole platform. All
no,
right,
it's great.
let's next up is Maxine. So Maxine, your job title changed. You're going to tell everybody all about that. And going through, your pivot, but Maxine comes from facilities management. Her last role was at JLL that ended on December 31st.
31st, yeah.
Right? Like, so you get to tell us all about that. And then we have Rohan, who is VP at Quess Corp, and Rohan is 3 months into this new role. So he also gets to tell us all about, kind of what's going on with him and this role. And Rohan comes with, tremendous L&D background, huge respect for his work and his body of work, and really excited to see what he does in that role. And then we have Avneet. And Avneet is in the coaching and helping people kind of realize their career pivots and their passion projects. And, I love Avneet just published a life planner book, and I was privileged to get one during the holiday season, and have been enjoying working through it. So, she'll bring that perspective to this conversation. We have a live poll that's happening, and it will happen, and we're gonna put it into the chat every once in a while. And this live poll will allow you guys to communicate with us. Where are you on the career pivot journey, and different types of programming. We have a lot of exciting programming coming up this year for this particular topic. So I'm going to start with the burning question. Hold on, the difficult question, right? So, I'm going to say this: the hardest, the people who fight you the most on career pivots and life chain pivots are sometimes the people who love you the most. And I say this, from personal experience. So I'm going to ask Maxine to start off with this question, which is, how do you manage the conflict of interest when you want to reinvent yourself, but your other half loves just the way you are?
So this one, it is actually not a career pivot. It's a personal pivot. So early 2000s, and I would exercise sporadically, but I've always had a keen interest in fitness and health. And my former partner didn't, so I'd always try and encourage, say, come on, let's go for bike rides, go for runs. Anyway, I ended up becoming a couch potato. I ended up just eating rubbish, just massively, just very, very unhealthy. And it was a point that came where we'd been on a holiday. Back then it was video cameras and it was no technology that we have today. And my family turned around and said, oh my God, Maxine, what's happened to you? And I said to them, why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you tell me? And I just said, you know what? I cannot be responsible for somebody else that doesn't want to change. I have to take the responsibility for myself because it's my health. And so the opportunity came. Company I was working with at the time, they were doing a series, what they call a raid, where you go off to the Alps, so the Italian mountains, and you're trekking through snow, you're cycling, you're canoeing. And that was going to take place in the September. And they launched the advert for it for teams in the May. So I said, right, this is the ideal opportunity for me to, if I'm going to make this change, just do it, just dive right in. So there was a ex-military chap that was part of the company, and he was put in charge of the team and also the training program. When I saw it, I nearly collapsed, because swimming so many lengths a week, cycling, running. The first time I got in the pool to start the regime, I could only swim 2 lengths. By the time we got to September, I could swim over 40 lengths. And that meant that in terms of my diet, my nutrition, my fitness, I was the fittest I'd ever been since I was in my 20s. So,
wow. Yeah.
The thing that I would say is that basically I just made the decision to change. I decided that, okay, if you want to carry on with that path, that's absolutely fine. But it was really hard. It was really hard.
So I'm going to ask the others to chime in on this. Have you ever had an instance where, and your other half, it can be a family member or someone you love the most, where you wanted to reinvent yourself in your career, but people really close to you were having a difficult time with it? Has that happened to any of you?
I can chip in. So I've moved since I've been married. I think I've moved 4 times. And always been tied to some kind of career move. And I think it all depends on how you enter that kind of relationship. If I just take so-called, like my wife, I think you enter the relationship based on love and trust and a bit of flexibility. I think that when you're trying to pivot to do something completely different, then there might be a little bit of flexibility giving you that space to kind of reinvent yourself. But of course, the idea is that it's going to be best for both parties involved, not just for yourself. And I think if they really trust you and really want to support you, they will try their best. Of course, there's going to be apprehension, because it's not just about your journey, it's about their journey as well. It's not just about yourself. So I've been lucky enough to have a wife that's followed me to Cape Town, to Vienna, and now to Dubai. But definitely it's something that's really challenging. I think you have a little bit of pressure where you want to do something different, but you want to make sure that it actually makes you a better person and you actually achieve what you're trying to achieve.
Okay. I love that. I love that. Okay. Anyone else want to chime in before I go to the next question? Okay. Let's go.
Sal, I just want to add one thing here, if I may.
Of course, please do.
And unfortunately, it's not in the direction that we have here. So I want to highlight that as well, which is to say that multiple pivots, as Lameen said as well, whether it's across geographies, across moving from a full-time role to something that was sort of independent and perhaps not as stable, to also, during the pandemic, to make some moves in here. I think I've been very fortunate to have a family, whether it's my wife or perhaps even folks and kids in that sense, who've always helped me discover that side of myself that I wanted to explore, right? So there was a reason for a pivot. And it was always to say that if you're sure about this and you're looking forward to it, then we'd wholeheartedly sort of be there. So in some senses, I'm not sure whether I have an experience to share, which is, in that direction, but perhaps more counterintuitive to say that if here's what you've thought about, I'm sure you've thought through this and you know what the pros and cons are. So just go for it.
Yeah. Well, I've had the exact opposite, guys. So, so I will share very, very quickly. I used to be a high-powered attorney, and then I decided I wanted to run a foundation and become a teacher. And for my family, very traditional Asian family background, they literally, I think my mother went to my partner and said, do you think she should not speak to someone? Maybe something's wrong with her. So sometimes families get very disappointed by career pivots. Now, I've had the time of my life building Gleek, and doing what I do. And, they've accepted that. But, sometimes people's expectation of who you are, particularly when you come from certain cultures, and if you go outside of that, it's very difficult for them to digest. You're right. So yeah, I just want to put that kind of on the table. All right. So I'm going to ask Rohan to start this one. Share your own personal pivot blockers or something that's gone wrong story, and why, and what would you do differently today, just based on what you know now versus what you knew back then?
Absolutely. So I guess, a couple of instances that I can look at in the early part of my career when I made some of the pivots as I look back now. All of those were in some ways guarded or in some ways to be safe, right? We would look at essentially a pivot to be something that would disrupt what you were doing in the past. And look at building obviously from what you've got, but sort of do something drastically different. And when I look back at some of those, one essentially was when I made the move geographically between India, in a place called Mumbai, and moved to the Silicon Valley of India called Bangalore. Within a very short span of time, I sort of moved on from being in a full-time employment to independent, and in some way, the thought was that can I go full hog, or shall I take small steps? And when I look back now, I think I wouldn't use a strong word as regret perhaps here, but I would say that when you decide to sort of do a particular pivot, you should perhaps go whole hog and not necessarily take half measures. So to me, sort of looking at your limitations when you're pivoting, I think, and then ensuring that you sort of go beyond that is what I would say. What I would do differently today, the second part of question essentially, is to look at the limitations and then sort of dust it off and say, hey, can I perhaps look at a bigger bet that I can put on myself? And that's something that I would perhaps share. The younger me perhaps was harsher on myself, and perhaps the wiser me now says that yes, just go for it.
Mm-hmm. Oh, wow. And what about any of you guys? Any others share your personal pivot blockers, gone wrong story, why, and what would you do different today?
Sal, I think I can chip in here. My story is that of literally my mom being the center of my life, right? And to many Asian cultures, very often we have a prescribed way of living life, which is go to school, go to college, do your master's, get married, have kids. And that was my mom's prescription for my life. And she wanted me to be a banker. I landed up in Mumbai because I was in love with someone at the time. And thanks to that gentleman, I guess his only role in my life was to lead me to the city of dreams, Mumbai. And before I could kind of think about what I consciously wanted to do, I landed a career in media. Now, this was not something that I consciously, had ever thought of in my wildest dreams. And also with, giving that profession almost 9 years of my life, you kind of develop like an identity of who you are, what you know, how people know you, and you kind of get attached to, how you've basically achieved or received acknowledgement and appreciation. Fortunately, I did really well, but when it came to time when I had to pick what next, my choice was rather unconventional, which was learning and development after media versus, getting into film or going into opening a media company or something of that sort. So it was extremely hard with trying to, once people have a certain opinion of who you are and what you do, to really rewire that as, being something else. And I think today I put myself through a lot of, and I would kind of borrow from Rohan on that one, which is, if I had to look back and tell myself what I would do differently today, one would be not try to fit in their prescription or anyone's prescription of who they think I should be, and just be like whoever I want to be. I can be not just one thing, I can be anything and everything that I want to be. And the second is, of course, be really kind to myself. I think I beat up myself a bit too much. So yeah, those would be the two lessons.
And what about you, Lameen? What for you?
Yeah, I just want to share when I basically left Vienna, moved to Cape Town to open up a coffee shop, because it was one of my passions. I went there with a kind of what I call a European mentality, where there's a very strong focus on quality. And I think what I learned was the concept of developed markets be developing markets. So one of the things I noticed is that in developed markets, supply chains are a lot more flexible, whereas I found in developing markets, the supply is the king. What I mean by that is that I found it difficult in terms of running my coffee business because I was basically held hostage to what the suppliers wanted to charge me. That's the first lesson. The second lesson that I also learned is that being in Cape Town was a very cliquey environment. So even though I would have people come to my cafe and say, this is one of the best coffees I've ever had, I would never see them again. Why? Because their friend had a cafe, and even though their friend's cafe served bad coffee, they would always pay patronage to their friends. So the second lesson was, doing a little bit of more research so that I don't go there with some kind of mentality or preconceived ideas. So one lesson that I would probably pass on to my younger self would be, if you're going to follow your passion, take your head with you. What I mean by that is that if you're going to do something, especially if you have a family, go there with a stronger, more robust financial plan and ease gently into what you want to follow as your passion.
Hey, I like that, because a lot of, and I love that, because a lot of people think you just need to jump, but you can actually be working on it as your side hustle.
Yes.
Until the timing is right to be able to do it. And, and that's so common today. I think COVID gave us all of that, right? The gift of side hustles, yeah. Right? To be able to go, yeah, I can have a side hustle quietly doing some stuff. All right, cool. All right. What are some professional pivots that you think everyone in the audience will face in their professional career? Who wants to take this?
I'm going to say one thing here, Sal, as we get into this discussion. It's very important to look at, we would usually talk about jobs perhaps years ago, perhaps a couple of decades ago, right? But there's a whole lot of discussion about careers today and in the future as well. And what I realized, I made a transition, not knowing of COVID, of course. I moved back from Singapore to India in December 2019, and voila, Jan 20 and the world are very different. And a whole lot of the thought that went in essentially is to say that there is a certain skill that you carry. It definitely need not be what you studied or you graduated with, but a skill that you carry within. And how can what you do from there on, it need not be one particular job, right? But a space that you can make your own, and which is essentially a career rather than a job. Now, one thing I would say for sort of people in the future, I think, full-time jobs perhaps may not be the order of the day as we go along. Perhaps a lot more gig and a lot more bringing that, right, is what would be required. So as individuals, to be able to discover what that, unique thing that you actually carry, which can be brought in to make a difference to the world. and then make whatever pivots that you have to from there on. So don't look at it from a lens of a job, perhaps, but how can you build a more meaningful career is what I would say.
Anyone else? I want to chime in here. Go ahead, Maxine.
Yeah, you
no,
okay.
Go ahead. You first.
Okay, so I just think that everyone now will experience risk of redundancies, or a company they work with being bought or sold, and that can put them in a precarious position of, okay, well, what's my situation? So as some steps to the audience, it would be not to panic, first of all, understand what the circumstances are, how it impacts your role. Can you reapply for your role? Can you look at something else in the organization, or do you need to go outside? And also, what is being offered if in the event that you are made redundant? Can you take a break, then reevaluate, okay, what are my interests? What can I now pursue as a start, or expanding on your education to then do a pivot? So those are two of the things I think are really prominent.
So I'm going to say, thank you for that, Max. I'm going to say that right now we're actually witnessing entire sectors that might get eliminated with ChatGPT, that people will have to do career pivots, things that are going to get, even just think about, I think there was something on social media today about ChatGPT taking a master's exam and getting a good grade. I saw 70 universities, US universities are closing this year, is the master's degree. So think about all of those educators. Think about think about marketeers as a whole. And then there's this whole sector of things happening in the world where people are going to have to do career pivots, going from Web 2 to Web 3. Which, we have a session not tomorrow, I think the day after on it. Think about moving from oil and gas to decarbonization and all the green skills. Think about traditional financial service sector and now fintech and crypto. There are all of these interruption happening right now that I think everybody, directly or indirectly in our audience, regardless of how old you are, how much you know in your sector, you are going to get impacted very quickly by what's happening in the world. That will somehow have to cause, it might not be your whole job, but if you look at your job as a scorecard of things you should be able to know and do, that scorecard is shifting of the things you should be able to know and do, right? In terms of a career pivot. So I think that is something we want to, kind of take note of. Okay, this is the age one, and I love this age one because when we talk about careers, people are always expecting, everyone to be in their 20s, and clearly we're all not. Maybe in our soul we are. What age, or is there age that's too old to career pivot because maybe you got it wrong the first, second, and third time? Like, is that possible? Just curious. Lameen, I'm going to have you take that one.
Well, short answer is I don't think there's any age that's too old. I think because just, following on the last question, a lot of things are changing so fast in terms of whether you're doing a gig or you're doing a side hustle. I'm already just over 50, and now I'm getting more into consultancy, looking at working with VCs, things I never thought I'd ever do if you asked me like that question like 20 or 30 years ago. And basically that part of that age pivot comes from looking at, okay, what are the skills I've acquired in the last 20, 25 years? And how can I market that into what I want to do and what am I passionate about? So I'm looking like 12 years ago, I ran a cafe after working for the British government and the UN, did that for 3 years. And I thought, okay, let me go back to the UN, did that for another 7 years. And then worked for a think tank in Saudi for about 9 months. And then last year I created a startup platform incubator, and now I'm working more on keynote speaking and also looking at supporting ideas to impact the world. So I don't think there's any age that's too old. I think that's why sometimes people always ask me, what kind of career should I pursue? What's in my heart? And I always say, what were you passionate about when you were 10 years old? Because I believe when you were under 10, there was something that you were really close to, that kind of innocent phase of your life. And I always believe that if you're aware of that, what you're passionate about before 10, you should always try and keep that in your heart and kind of resuscitate that in the next 10, 15, 20 or 30 years time. So short answer, I don't think there's any age.
So, Lameen, you're not going to like this comment. I often tell young people when I talk to them, don't pursue your passion as a career if you don't have a strength in it. Otherwise, it's a hobby.
Yeah, no, you're right. That's why I said earlier on about one of the lessons that I learned when I had my cafe. I said, well, one of the things is that you should plan ahead. Just don't go ahead, jump in. I never ever advise anybody to quit their job. That's just crazy. I always say start planning for it. Like when I was even at the UN, when I knew that I was going to leave, I said, I focused on the concept of an entrepreneur. So I knew that maybe later in my life, I want to be working on presentations. So I used to always volunteer for my director to prepare his presentations for two reasons. It helped me understand better how to do PowerPoint presentations, but also I was in charge of how he communicated the message. So I began to get that kind of skill ahead of time. And I always say, what are the things that in your career or in your job they're giving free training on? Start doing that training so that maybe in the next 5 or 10 years time, you get fired or you at least acquire some basic core skills. And I think nowadays, as you know, Sally, and you can't basically get by with not having any technology skills. You have to know how to use Zoom and all the other kind of things. So start learning those things now, because something in the future, you might have to have those skills ahead.
Okay, so there's no age, but there are skills. Skills trump. It's, in terms of okay, good. I like that. All right, Rohan, for you, and then we're going to go to Avneet on this. What are the 3 mindset skills from former jobs? So I kind of, in many ways, it's kind of going back to, did you make a mistake the first and second and third time? And I think when we think about it in hindsight, it's never a mistake. They all add up, right? Are there any 3 mindset, or skills from former jobs that helped you ace any pivot that you've gone through?
Absolutely. So I was just going to say that, borrowing from the previous question, that because you made a third pivot doesn't necessarily mean the first and second one may have been wrong. It would probably just mean at that point in time in your life, right, you saw a whole lot of things falling in place, and then you're probably a different person. So I was running a session in 2019 for my team where I was looking at my behavioral profiles over a period of 15 years and how that has changed. And it just dawned upon me as I was preparing for that I was a different person 15 years ago, and I'm a different person. This was in 2019. So clearly, as you evolve, perhaps you make some of those pivots. So I thought I'll just first put that on the table. Now, a few things that I think have helped me through multiple pivots, over the last 19 odd years of work. One essentially, has been to have a growth mindset, and not just, let's say, in theory, but essentially literally be obsessed with learning and getting to know more and more things. It sort of gets you to have an open mind and essentially do things that you haven't done in the past. And so at every point in time, I'm looking at what is it that I haven't done or have done for the first time, over the last some time. And when there's not much I've done over a while, then I consciously sort of push myself, to sort of put that in. So that's one thing. So having a growth mindset, I think, is extremely important. The second piece is, and I was listening to a podcast driving to work today, and they were discussing about your real self, right? And perhaps the definition of your real self is flawed, and say that there are multiple selves within you at every point in time, right? So knowing all of those selves within at that point in time, to say that, these are your triggers, these are the things that are your strengths, and these are the things that you could leverage, I think. So knowing yourself well, I'm not sure whether you can classify that as a mindset or a skill, but I think very, very important. That helps you make some of those pivots. You could be at a point where you could make a pivot and you could just go off. So sort of, to be in that right direction. That's the second thing. And the third thing I've realized a lot more over the last 4 or 5 years, there's been a whole lot said about technology and how people would perhaps lose jobs as a matter of sort of technology coming in. I see it a little bit differently, right? So while there will be machines coming in, technology coming in, and jobs would change, like you mentioned, banking was different years ago. banking is different today, and perhaps it'll be different tomorrow. So essentially, it is a different skill that you would pick, and focus on the fact that while there is AI, there is also EI, right? Human skills. And so how are we able to work with human beings even in the future, while we'll work with machines, while we'll work with technology, but still being able to work with people? I think that's something that will never go out of vogue or out of fashion. So these three things in my mind have helped me, pivot quite well.
Wonderful. Thank you for that, Rohan. And I can say you definitely have the people skills. I noticed that. You're a
Kind
huge,
of you.
Yeah. You're an absolute great ambassador. Avneet, you're a coach and you work through mindset with many of your clients who are doing career pivots. So what about for you? What are the 3 mindsets you focus on? And with your clients, and how do you get them? Because a lot of times I think they think their last jobs or their journey might have been a mistake. And how do you get them to really understand that, those are all, many of them, stepping stones to allow them to be able to do the pivot?
As you beautifully said it, right, Sarah, that always the dots, you may not see it straight ahead, but when you look back, they tend to connect with each other. So talking from my own personal story, right, I often tell people, firstly, what is a skill? A skill is something that becomes second nature. You get so good at it that you don't need to consciously make an attempt to do it well. It becomes, it's embedded in your DNA. Now, those could be soft skills, those could be technical skills. And the beauty with skills is you can learn them. But when it comes to a mindset, number one, it's really, really hard to identify whether you have a constructive or an unconstructive mindset. And it does require someone to offer different paradigms and perspectives for someone to at least analyze something from a different lens for a certain period of time. So what I would say is there are 3 things, whether or not, each case that I work with is very, very individualistic, and it wouldn't be fair for me to generalize something across the board. But there's often a quote that I use with people, which is BMW, that if you were to develop a skill, and you were to drive a BMW someday, make these your DNA, which is first, believe in yourself. So if you train yourself again and again to find a way to reassure yourself and believe in yourself, you may make mistakes. You could choose to learn, get better, fail at it, but choose to believe in yourself and keep getting better. The second is to master your mind. We don't often take time to really reflect on what are we even thinking, right? Like, where are our thoughts and emotions leading us? So the minute we're able to zone out and just look at it from an outside lens, and if you're able to train your mind again and again to step into a state, an emotional state that is constructive, automatically you start seeing things align. And the third is certainly work on your soft skills, right? Because those are your asset that someone could throw you out of your job, you could be made redundant, but these are skills they're the arrows in your armor that no matter where you go, you're always going to take them with you. So if you put in the time and effort to invest in this BMW, I'm pretty sure,
I love that though, right? Now every time I think of BMW, I'm going to think of that. I love that. And you know what? I have to tell you guys, a really funny thing that's happening. Well, not funny, but interesting what's happening at Gleek. So when Chat GPT came out, and everybody's been playing on it, the first thing I did is I went to our data science team, and as all of you here in the room and many of you speaking, you have answered Gleek questions, giving your quality of thought to how to handle that situation. And I immediately went to the data science team and I said, run our questions through Chat GPT and then put it up against our mentor answers. I will show you how humans do it better. And in every instance, we as a soft skills community, I don't want to even call it outperforming. There is just no comparison to how we choose to handle open-ended questions, because we as humans, we tell stories and we give context, and ChatGPT doesn't know how to do that. So I want to say to you that, my data science team is having a field day because, the things that we thought we were building in theory, now we actually know for a fact what we've built. So really, really exciting in terms of, soft skills and human skills. Love that. So I know we have a lot of coaches in this room also. I saw we have Doris, we have Maxine, we have Avneet on the panel. Coaching seems to be this buzzword, it's been buzzing for a while now, a couple of years now. Do any of you actually have a coach? And I'm going to say this to all of our panelists. Do any of you have a coach? And did it really help you with your career pivot, and how?
Sadly,
and let our non-coaches answer first. Hold on. Let our non-coaches answer first. Okay, Max, let's go.
All right. So I wish I had a coach with my early 20s pivot when my careers advisor said, oh, no, you can't go to university because you don't have the right qualifications. I could have done with a coach right then. However, I did have a coach when I wanted to move into facilities management, started doing the training. So I've had coaches on and off during my career. And more so now, though, it's more of a mentor, because I think when you get to a certain point in your career, your requirements and your needs become different. You know yourself, you know where you're going, and it's not so much the coaching, it's more the mentoring that becomes more value add. So a coach, absolutely yes, when you're in your career, you're looking to change, just to not only hold you accountable, but help you hold yourself accountable as well. That's what I'd say.
Rohan, Lameen, what are your thoughts on that?
Lameen, you go first. Go ahead. Yeah.
Well, I actually wanted to be a coach before I came to Dubai. So I did a few courses on Mind Valley, and I actually got a certificate. And in fact, that was what I was going to do. I was going to move to Dubai and be a coach. But when I got here, things obviously changed. What I actually enjoyed about doing the coach courses was that most of it I found focused more on yourself. So it developed a lot of self-awareness. I would say about 75 to 80% of the course. And I actually thought, oh, these are things I really love to do. And that gave me the confidence to say, okay, maybe I don't want to do coaching yet, but I want to do something differently. Of course, I meant to be a director of a think tank. But I think I don't have a coach, but I do think that it helped in a way to my current career pivots. Yeah.
Okay. And what about you, Rohan?
Yep. So, I've as well been sort of a practicing coach over a bit, but I must say that even a coach needs a coach, right? So, honestly, in a whole lot of times that I pivoted, I was fortunate to have, a professional who was able to help me look at myself differently than I did. Essentially, so I would hold the mirror to others as a coach, but I, helped. I got that help myself. At the same time, over the last almost, I'd say a little over my professional career, when I met my wife before I got her to work, and I've had we've been married for a shorter duration than that, but I've known her for a while. And I've seen a whole lot of, from a personal side, showing me the mirror that happened as well. So there have been formal coaches as well. At the same time, there's been a coach at home as well. So I guess those are two things that have really helped me. And I would say that a whole lot of us may think that we may not need a coach. There's a beautiful TED talk, by a gentleman called Dr. Atul Gawande. It's a beautiful TED talk talking about why everybody needs a coach. And he's a surgeon and talks about, how there was a significant improvement in clinical outcomes for him. And if some of us have actually not seen this, you must, when you next get the time, spend about, I think it's an 18-20 minute talk about, and especially during pivots, right? I think it always helps to have one.
And what about you, Avneet?
Sal, so certainly I often tell people to look at I have a coach. I always will till my last breath on this planet. I just hope to find someone that serves me at, different stages of life. And I would have worked with several coaches. I practice as a coach. In addition, I also run a startup network where I work very closely with women entrepreneurs. And I often need to educate them to not mistake a coach to be a mentor and not mistake a mentor to be a coach. That's one. And the second is to not look at a coach as an expense, but consider it an investment. Why? Because it takes a lot to find somebody who does not have an agenda except your growth, right? Anyone else that you talk to might either pass on their experience or the advice of whatever worked or did not work for them. Whereas coaching, just the format of how it works and the skills that a coach might be, is skilled to use are completely dedicated to harnessing your peak potential, right? So yes, coaching is expensive. Yes, coaching does require expertise. Today, there are multiple bodies that could, help you find credentials versus just chemistry with who you work with. So yeah, I think if someone hasn't tried coaching yet, you absolutely must before you make an opinion of whether or not it could add value to you.
Okay. So, this particular question, I'm going to ask, and I'm going to share a little bit of my feedback as an entrepreneur, startup founder, and then of course everyone chime in. So there's so many types of coaches. How do you qualify a coach as being the right one for your career pivot? Whether it's a career pivot, whether it is whatever you are, right? And I think for most people out there, we don't realize it's not a one-size-fit-all coach. Everybody just says, coach, and they don't take the time to go figure out, is this a performance coach? Is this my self-awareness, getting to understand myself coach? Is this I recently had a huge eye-opener about this, is that, I just thought a coach was a coach, right? And didn't take the time to really kind of say, oh, they're all different kinds of coaches. And you are correct. You're only ever a version of yourself, and at different times you need different versions. So I can, I just want to share as a startup founder, more than anything in scaling a startup, I actually needed a mastermind group of tech founders who had scaled tech to be able to guide and to be able, because the types of things that I needed, a coach could not have given me. Do you understand what I'm saying? And sometimes it's recognizing, whereas when I shifted from law to come into the space, I was exploring more myself and what that could mean. And I did have a coach for a year, so it's so important, I think, that we understand what that difference is, and it's not a coach is a coach is a coach. And I think also for the professionals to know what is your sweet spot, because you can't be everything to everybody. Also, right? That's, one of the big mistakes, I think, also is that, you can't be a coach for everything, right? There are certain things that's your niche, and to be able to do that. So Avneet, tell us a little bit about your niche and your life plan book, and who is the avatar on that life plan book, and then we'll keep going on that.
So Sal, one of the most beautiful ways I like to explain coaching, right? And just kind of building on what you said, which is at this time you were seeking community over coaching. Yep. So what is coaching and how can we understand it in the simplest way? The one I like to explain it as follows, which is a coach essentially helps you bring your heart's desire, soul's purpose, and mindset into alignment. Your heart's desire, your soul's purpose, and your mindset into alignment to achieve your goals. So if you are working towards a specific goal, a coach can certainly help you, right? For example, if you were to go to a fitness coach, you want to be of a certain, weight, a certain size that you want to fit, they're essentially able to help you achieve that. If you're working with a performance coach, you probably are working on certain aspects at work, where executive coaching and performance coaching are often, quite intertwined. Tony Robbins could be a great point of reference. Where you need to push through certain personal limitations is when you'd go to a performance coach. I personally, as a vision and a communications coach, what I encourage people to do is I help them engineer their life and business vision. So the least a person works with me is 100 days, where over this period, I essentially take them through my signature methodology that helps them with self-awareness and with engineering their goals and putting an action plan in place. So that's what I essentially help my clients to do, because I often find people, so there are two buckets of people who'd come to me. There would be entrepreneurs who'd say, I'm overwhelmed, I'm doing a lot of things, I don't have work-life balance, I'm lacking focus, I'm procrastinating, help me figure my stuff. Then there's people who are early stage founders who just want to start off with their business, but they're stuck in a job and feel really secure and are not quite sure how to make that pivot and when is the right time. So how do they really plan for that, put a plan in place, and very gently make that transition? So that's essentially what I do as a vision and communications coach. Communication is hardcore soft skill. I need not explain it. But yeah, if someone was to understand what I do, which is helping dreamers become doers.
Yeah. Okay, hold on. So you're not the performance, but that's okay, right? Like, I think it's important to know what you're not, right? And I think very often we're afraid to not say out loud what we're not. And I love that. I love that you're very clear about what you are. All right, I'm going to ask the very difficult question. You know, I had to also deal with this year, but I want your feedback on this. Did you have to accept less money in your career pivot, even after some of us have had 15 and 30 years as being a professional in the workforce? How did you handle it? Who wants to take that? Yes, let's go, Max.
I'll be brave, brave and vulnerable, so they say. 2010 became a single mom after a 16-year relationship. So I started working in a global role for quite a large facility management company. Quite hectic, trying to then navigate school, working away, and basically 12 months in, I burnt out. So got back from a trip from America, basically, and the jet lag was still jet lag after like 2 weeks. So I was saying to people, I'm sure jet lag doesn't last this long, not realizing that there was something seriously wrong. Lost my hair, went to get some blood tests, and basically I was highly anemic, very anemic, and had to take time out of work. So after 3 months, I went back to work, but I still wasn't ready. In that time, basically did counseling, worked on my fitness, the training regimes just got ramped up. And it was about the mental and physical recovery that I had to go through. So 4 months later, in total, went back to work, but I went back to a role that was a project management role, UK based, no direct line reports. And it was a 5K drop in salary. So at first it kind of stings because you're thinking, oh my God, that's a lot of money. And it is a lot of money. But the way I looked at it was, it's not a lot in comparison to what happened and why it happened. So whilst, look, fortunately, I'm able to manage. They're quite senior roles. So I wasn't in a position where I was on the breadline. But it's just really brought home that balance, trying to run as you were, but there's been a significant shift in my lifestyle that I didn't take account of, and I refused to recognize because I wanted to keep everything consistent and secure for my daughter. So yes, it stung, but the outcome of it, I'm still struggling sometimes with the work life and keep working, but recognize that sometimes that was necessary for me for my well-being and for my health. So
and what about Rohan and Lameen? Have you guys ever taken a pay cut for a pivot?
Yes. So obviously, when I moved to Cape Town, set up my own business, a coffee shop, I definitely took a huge pay cut. I practically did not pay myself for about 3 years. So, but when I came to Dubai, then the pivot worked the other way. So it was like more than the pay rise is a lot more than even I dreamt about. So it kind of balanced out, I guess, in 10 years. So usually, so it can work both ways. I think that's been my experience. Yeah.
What about you, Rohan?
Yep. So I think when I went independent a couple of times, I think there was a dip in what I would take home. But what it reminds me, it reminded me then, it still reminds me essentially, is your pivot needs to be, driven by the why and not the what, right? And so if you are strongly driven by why you're pivoting and how that's aligning to who you are, I think it makes it far easier. But I must not definitely, mince reality is the fact that when you do that, essentially there is some adjustment that perhaps you or people around you perhaps may need to make. I'd say around both the times that I made this pivot, I think as a family or as a couple, I think we sort of, we knew what we were getting into, right? So that made it, far easier. But I would say that, it's the why, and then you just need to be ready for whatever consequences it has. So in life, perhaps, depending on where you are, if you're single, if you're married, if you've got kids, then all of these things, you need to think, a couple of times. And so this may sound counterintuitive to what I said earlier about taking that plunge. But what I meant essentially was when you're sure, then you take the plunge full on. Until then, you sort of still figure how you make that.
So I'll offer you guys a perspective, certainly for our viewers, from an employer's point of view, hiring people who have had 15 and 30-year experiences and they're doing pivots. And I always find myself in a catch-22 because they're going into a brand new area, particularly when you're in tech and it's emerging areas. And sometimes my 15, 20, 30 years out there, they do not have the skills of my 25-year-olds. And because some of those hard skills are mandatory for the job, just to be able to perform the job. So superior probably in the experience and soft skills, but the hard skills are needed just to get the job done. And I have found that it's a very it's really a catch-22 because automatically you want to give credit for you've been out there for 15 years and 20 years and whatever time period. But sometimes I've found it's bitten me because then the expectation is, well, then I expect you to be performing at that level and the hard skills. So not the soft skills, guys. This is instances where the lack of the hard skills end up being the problem. Because, for whatever reason. And so it's something I want to say to you that more and more needs to be discussed in terms of like, really, how do you do the pivot and how do you go in for your worth to be recognized, but also for you to recognize you're also in a learning trajectory, right? So, it's a little bit of a catch-22. Okay. I'm going to ask this question because we're all human and it's a question we all know. How do you not get depressed and stay motivated in a career pivot, which is essentially starting from scratch? How do you deal with your own ego starting from scratch, particularly when you have risen and you are esteemed and you have all kinds of things attached to former identities of yourself? You talked about that, Avneet. And how do you keep yourself motivated? I know for me, sometimes it's really hard. I often say to people, being a startup founder every day, I wake up 1 foot in fear, 1 in courage, going, holy crap, what did I get myself into? Right? I don't think there's a day people are like, I'm like, does it ever stop? And I can trust, I've talked to many of my unicorn founders of like, no, Sal, it just keeps coming and you just keep going. How many other people are you responsible towards, right? Avneet, Maxcene, Rohan, let's hear a little bit about that because we don't talk about it. And that's a big part of, the journey of going through these pivots. It is not easy and we are human.
Yeah, shall I start?
Okay, whoever wants to start. I want my
Okay,
girls.
so, so I'll be really quick as well, so others can chip in. My daughter is a massive motivating factor for me. So especially when I became single, I just kept going, and she was the key driving force. Another part is that I leaned into my local church as well. I mean, they've probably mopped up a pool of tears, but that emotional, that spiritual support came from them. Oh my God, there's just been times when it has just been so hard, and you don't actually see how you're going to get out of it, but you just have to believe and trust. Sometimes it's going to take longer than you expect. It's not going to be overnight, but just keep going, chipping away at in the direction that you want to get to, and just ask for help as well. People are out there that will just support you, that you can lean on until you can stand up yourself. So that's what I would say.
Okay. Anyone else wants to chip in on this? Let's have our men chip in. This is a conversation our men don't really like to talk about. Let's go, Lameen.
I wasn't sure if I was speaking too much, but yeah, definitely I can relate to this a lot. So I mean, I think it goes back to what Rohan said about your why. And I think focusing on that why. So if I can relate from two examples. Obviously, having the cafe, going to a brand new city, taking your whole family with you. First 3 or 4 months, you can count the amount of people that come into the cafe. And of course, your wife is saying to you, why don't we move to Cape Town? Where's the money? What did you get the family into? And I think just kept on, just going focus on the why. I always tell everybody, when I had the cafe, I never woke up in the morning, even though I had my cafe at 6:30 a.m. every morning. I never woke up saying I'm going to work. Never entered my head. It was just like, get up and just follow your dream every day. Of course, when I was completely dead broke, going back to what Maxcene said, my faith, then I got a call from the UN saying, do you want to come back to work? I mean, I bargained hard with them to increase my salary before I went back, but I knew I was going to take the job because I was like basically penniless, literally had like 25 pounds in the bank account. And then that call came, and then that was I told my wife, we're never going to be on the street. Don't worry, God's going to take care of us. And that's what happened. I think just focusing on the why, that's kind of motivates you. That's what I would go to, and just having your faith as well. Yeah.
Anything, Rohan and Avneet?
Yep, a quick thing to share. Whenever you're feeling low, firstly to acknowledge that you are, versus necessarily trying to the false sense of happiness to say, hey, here's how I'm feeling. To acknowledge that, I think is important, because otherwise you're just literally fooling yourself. That's one. The second thing that has helped me over the while is not attaching my identity to a role or a title, but being something in particular. So the value that I could bring in, irrespective of where I worked or what I did. And the moment I was able to do that, I think, irrespective of what anybody else thought about me, or for that matter, however difficult life would be, I think I was able to pull myself through. So acknowledging and believing in the value bringing.
Okay.
So I think, Sal, my colleagues have said such amazing things. I mean, all the other panelists with, being centered in your why, with, acknowledging emotions in all these aspects. I'm wondering, have you heard of this gentleman called Ison Dwight?
No idea. Tell us.
So he was a military sergeant who used to fight wars for the US government in some really harsh weather conditions. And one of his most popular quotes was, plans are worthless, but planning is everything. Mm-hmm. Because what he would find is that with his entire battalion of soldiers, they would spend a lot of time putting a plan in place. But when they went into the battlefield and what really happens, what kind of, weather conditions they meet, all of that was uncontrollable. But all they could do was prepare themselves, put a plan A, put a plan B, put a plan C in place, and then just surrender, right? Beyond a point, not everything is in your control. So people get depressed when they try to expect results or change now. But if you're able to phase that out, plan for it, take it a step at a time, and also support yourself with the right people, that could be, your loved ones, that could be your old school teacher, whoever it is that's
Hold on, your dog.
my dog, yes, he's called Champ. But that support system, right? That's what essentially helps you take a break. Otherwise, you're just going to be sulking in your emotions. So being able to balance that, I think, is extremely valuable with the right people and planning.
Thank you. I love that. It's the if then plan, right? So if this happens, then I'm going to do this. If this happens, then I'm going to do this. And I actually do this with the sales team, right? Part of the training is to stay motivated, because you get so many no's, and you get so many no's, I have to tell you, as a startup founder, particularly when you're raising. And I have mentally written out for myself, that's something I've learned, is if then, and you put the things and all of it, and you have trained your brain to be able to respond to the no's and the negativity and the whatever, because you gave it a then. You don't leave it to wander on its own to get demotivated and depressed. You've told it what the then is, right? Like, it's like, if you got 50 no's, then okay, you're moving on to something else, and you're not looking at this again for the next, and you've trained your brain to kind of get out of that. All right, I'm going to ask, this is the last question to all of, to everyone. I mean, it's such a lovely conversation that we're having, and it's such an important conversation, and your perspectives are so rich. And this was, I'm going to go to Lameen, right? If today I were to give you $2 million, and if you're thinking of a career pivot, would you still do it right now?
Yes. I mean, if you gave me $2 million, I would probably. So one of the things I did before I moved to Dubai, I had did a lot of visualization exercises. And the vision that came into my brain was basically having, being in a kind of a cafe space and giving motivational talks and inviting people to talk to the youth. So that's something I tried to create last year with my concept of 100 Ideas Cafe, which is basically supposed to be a crowdsourcing platform for ideas to change the world. So I think if you give me $2 million now, I would probably focus on that, because I really have a strong sense of duty to the next generation. So I'll probably pivot a little bit into that. Yes.
Okay. What about you, Rohan? $2 million. Would you choose to career pivot right now?
I would. Absolutely, I would.
Yeah.
I think increasingly, even connecting to what you just put on the slide earlier, right, about the one before this, it's essentially to look at the why and connecting to the what. So the why continues perhaps to be the purpose, and the what are different life goals that I would have. So I say, anchoring it to the why, I think, in fact, I keep telling my wife, expect a whole lot many more pivots as we go along. So, never say never.
Okay. And what about you, Max?
Absolutely. I actually thought about this, and I just put, I would pivot head first into my passion, academy and inspiring, educating, and then a foundation as well, because I'm passionate about mental health and helping families with young children with depression, anxiety. So I would just go all in. Absolutely.
What about you, Avneet? $2 million.
Can we make that 20?
Okay, $2 million. Okay, I only have two right now. Okay, $2 million. Would you still, what career pivot would you do right now with $2 million?
Oh, whether or not I would do it, I think I've kind of trained myself to believe, even though I might want to settle, time moves so fast that it would, and it's so sporadic, it won't let me. So I have convinced myself to believe that I'm in a lifelong pivot and that anything can happen anytime, and I need to be quick to respond. So yes, I welcome new opportunities, and I'm always happy to, it's not just about a pivot, but it's about how can I layer on to who I am and become better and better and better. So yeah, those are my thoughts.
So I'm going to answer, and we're going to end on this note. If I had $2 million right now, I absolutely would not change a thing of what I'm doing, I think I would just absolutely just continue building Gleek, tall, wide, and it's such a beautiful thing to know that. And maybe I might take on some additional Gleek stuff. Gleek has all this tall and wide vision. But I don't think there would be. I do feel that I'm doing my life's work, and I'm honoring all of your life's work with Gleek. And it's such a privilege. And I want to end on that note with all of you. I want to thank you